Okay, guys, today we're going to do an angle types review. So you can see this graphic organizer in your paper packet on page 39. I do encourage you to get it out so that you can reference it when we're doing the activity. But as a quick review here, we've talked about all of these different angle types, the first being adjacent. Adjacent are angles that are next to each other. So if we look here in this picture, we've got angle 1. That's what I wanted to do here. We've got angle 1 and we've got angle 2. They are adjacent because they share a common fence or common side, and they also share that vertex, that point there at the end. So angle 1 and angle 2 are said to be adjacent. We call those our neighboring angles. Non-adjacent is absolutely just the opposite of that. We've got two angles. So here's angle 1, here's angle 2. They're not truly next to each other. They're close to each other, but they're not next to each other. They do share this vertex, but they miss the common side. Each angle has their own separate sides. So there's no common fencing, so I say. Angle 1 and angle 2 in this picture are non-adjacent. So again, this non out front just simply means that they're not neighbors. Then we take a look at the next one. We've got complementary angles. We recently looked at complementary and supplementary. Remember, complementary angles are angles whose measurements add up to equal 90. So in the picture here below, we can tell that these angles are complementary because we see this 90-degree measuring box here. So we just kind of understand that angle 1 is complementary to angle 2 because again, this measurement, when I add it up with this measurement, is going to give me the entire right angle of 90 degrees. They don't have to be adjacent or quote neighbors. They can also just be two separate angles who, when we add their measurements up, they're going to equal 90. So for instance, I could have an angle like this and say it's 60 degrees and then have another angle, again, not neighbors, not touching, that's 30 degrees. These angles are also considered to be complementary because again, the sum of their measurements when we add them up equal 90. The last one here, supplementary, it is basically just the idea that we have angles that equal 180. So if they are next to each other, they are neighbors, you can kind of see visually that they make a straight line. Straight line makes a half circle or protractor, and those would be angles that are supplementary because their values are going to equal 180. So I could have like 110 over here on the right hand side. Measure of angle 1 would maybe be something like 70 because again, their measurements equal 180. If they're not adjacent to each other, just like we did with complementary, I could split up those two angles, make one here and make them not even attached or adjacent. Those are still considered to be supplementary because again, their measurement values are added up to equal 180. All right, so let's take a look at the review activity. So if you were in person, you have, and actually even if you're at home, you have the paper packets that have these drawings on there. So we're just gonna go through them and talk about different angle type relationships and see if you can pick them out from an image. So again, if you've got that graphic organizer, I think it's very helpful to reference. I might pull it out here and there if we need it. But otherwise, let's take a look at your first picture here. All right, so here's my first picture. It is found on page 40 of your packet if you want to look at it. The questions are on page 41. So starting with number 1, naming two adjacent angles. And as a quick recap, guys, I always talk to you about if you see a number indicating a label for an angle, that's the best method. However, if you do not, as you see in this first graphic, we don't have any kind of numbers that represent the angle. I see measurements, right, like 120 and 20, but those aren't actually the labels for our angles. So if we're going to be labeling angles, we use the letters, and it's kind of like as if you draw it. So if I wanted to label this top angle here, I would say angle A, B, E. All right, so let's dive in. First question here is looking at this graphic, name two adjacent angles. So it's kind of a key vocab task. You have to remember what adjacent is. Adjacent are neighboring angles, so there are a ton of options here, guys. We have a ton of angles that are right next to each other. We could work our way around the circle. We could say this angle is neighbors with this angle. I could say that yellow angle is neighbors with this angle. I could switch it up and completely say these two angles So you could choose any two angles that are next to each other. So name two adjacent angles. Again, if I was going to label the ones I just mentioned, I would say angle B, angle EBG, and my yellow angle there, I could say GBD. So those would be an example of two adjacent angles. All right, let's take a look at another one. So question 2 asks us find two non-adjacent angles. That is just any two angles that are not neighbors. So you could pick any two angles again that you'd want. Let's pick this one right here and anything that is not next to it. So basically we can't pick this one and we can't pick that one because those would be neighbors. But I could pick this one. So if I was going to label those, I would say EBG. That's that yellow angle. And then my green angle would be CBF. And again, guys, we need 3 letters in order to correctly label our angles. All right, so looking at question 3, find two more adjacent angles. So again, any two angles that are next to each other, that is what the word adjacent means. So I could choose, maybe this angle right here and this angle on top. So I could say CBA, ABE. You could choose two different ones. The options are endless. All right, naming two supplementary angles. This one, again, there are some options here, guys, but we are looking for supplementary. So I know that supplementary is equal to 180. Now, if I look at my measurements up here, the only two numbers I see are 120 and 20. If I add those together, I only get 140. So those two measurements are not going to help me in identifying supplementary angles. But if you remember from our kind of quick review here, and if I bring down my chart, let's see if I can get this in the front of things here. Supplementary angles, if you don't have the measurements, you can also identify it by looking for a straight line and finding the two angle measurements that make up that straight line. So moving my graphic organizer back up out of the way. If I look for a straight line in there, I only see one, which would be right here. And it is made up of this angle right here and this angle. So two supplementary angles, there's actually only one choice here. We could say CBA. And we have ABE. All right, let's take a look at another picture here. So different graphic, same kind of idea. We're going to be looking at the vocabulary and kind of even putting a couple terms together. So looking at number 5, it's going to ask us to name two adjacent angles that are complementary. And remember, according to our definitions, adjacent means neighbors. Complementary is 90 degrees. So two angles that are next to each other that equal 90 degrees. So looking up at my graphic here, hopefully you're kind of focusing in on these two angles right here. They are right next to each other. Again, they share that common fence in the middle, right? They're touching. And their angle measurements equal 90. 40 and 50 equal 90. So again, if we're looking to label, we start at one side, go to the middle, and go out to the other side. So we'd have XQZ. And the second complementary adjacent angle there would be ZQS. All right, let's look at question number 6. Name two non-adjacent angles that are complementary. So again, looking at the vocabulary, non-adjacent means not neighbors, and complementary we just talked about equals 90 degrees. So two numbers there that we see that are not next to each other that equal 90 degrees. Again, there's only one option here for this one. Here is 50 degrees. We know from our last activity this angle above it is 40 degrees. Yes, it's complementary, but they're next to each other. And our directions say non-adjacent, which means I should choose this angle over here on the right because they are not adjacent, but again, their measurements equal 90 degrees. So we'd have ZQS and VQY. Okay, question 7. Find a measure of an angle that is supplementary to XQ or XQZ. So first, let's look for XQZ. XQZ. We know its measurement is 40. So supplementary is a vocab term in there that kind of clues us into what we're looking for. Supplementary is 180 degrees. So we want to find a supplement to 40. So you can think to yourself two ways. 40 plus what is going to give us 180? Maybe you can do that mental math in your head. If you cannot, remember we talked about using the inverse of subtraction. So 180 minus 40 would also give you that answer. And our measurement of an angle that is supplementary would be 140. All right, question 8. Next page here, new graphic. And again, this follows along in your packet. You should be able to see all the questions and all the different graphics. Name two non-adjacent angles. So again, non-adjacent is the key word here that tells us what we're doing. Non-adjacent means non-neighboring angles. So there's many options in here. We could choose this guy here on the right, QOR, and I could choose any of these other three angles. The only one I could not choose is this one right here because it is right next to it. It is an adjacent angle, so that one would not be an option. So again, you could choose any of those other green ones if you chose the yellow one to begin with. So if I chose this one, those would be an example of a non-adjacent angle relationship. All right, so looking at question 9, name two complementary angles. So again, complementary is what clues you in as to what we are looking for. Complementary equals 90 degrees. 45 and 45 is going to give us 90 degrees. You can also kind of see, even though it's not indicated, this does make a pretty good right angle here. So 45 and 45 would equal 90. So we would label those angles LOM for the green angle, and then my yellow angle NOM. All right, 2 more questions here, guys. Hopefully you're getting a little more comfortable with this. Okay, question 10. Find the measure of the complement to POQ. So we talked about complement is just a kind of different form of the word complementary. Still looking for equaling up to 90 degrees. So find a measurement equal to 90 degrees to POQ. So POQ is right here. It is 20, and you could think 20 plus what gives me 90? Or we could use that opposite inverse, 90 minus 20, and that's going to give you the value of 70, or 20 plus 70 equals 90. So the complement, the measure that would be complement to it would be 70 degrees. All right, last question here, guys. 11, name two non-adjacent supplementary angles. So again, key vocab words in here, non-neighboring angles that equal 180 degrees. So non-neighboring equaling 180 degrees. Hopefully you see, and sometimes people miss this, this angle down here at the bottom is actually an angle. It is a large angle of 160. So supplementary equals 180. 160 plus 20 is going to give us 180. There is a measurement here or an angle that is 20 degrees. So those two angles would be not neighbors. They're close to each other, but they're not neighbors. So they would work for non-adjacent and supplementary. All right, guys, if you were in class with me live, you were getting participation points for this. If you were at home and you missed it and you would like to recoup the points, I'm sorry you missed the review, but you could take a picture of the questions, which would be found on page 41, 43, and 45 of your packet. You could take a picture of those. After watching this video, we went through some of the answers. You can choose different answers if you like for some of those, but you could submit those 3 pictures for credit for this assignment. If you need any help, reach out, and good luck.